Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀.
The Ashen Forge.
Hello, and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. Sorry for this being such a late start. Entirely my fault. How are y'all two? How y'all doing?
Feeling good. Started playing some other games and messing around with a little this and that.
Wait, you started playing some other games. You're always playing other games.
Yeah. I hadn't played Destiny 2 before. I hadn't even really looked at it.
Okay.
It's fun. It reminds me of Defiance.
Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, this has all been my fault. If anything could go wrong. So for those who don't know, my computer is actually a desk, a literal desk with the computer built in the desk. It's actually quite badass. It took me about a year to plan, but I'm pretty sure the USB hub that I have sitting external has stopped working, so my headphones would not work. Had to figure that out. As soon as I figured that out, Steam Deck no longer works. So I'm not sure if there's been a short or something that would make sense. I don't know why that would have happened. But anyways, that's been the delay, and we'll see how things go. So we've got a lot to talk about and some catching up, I guess, from last week, because Diggs has made quite the splash into.
I see what you did there.
What's going on here? I want to start off a couple of things, though, just really quick. So, this last week's been interesting for me. So we are a 3-person team. We do not at all always agree with each other, and often we disagree with each other. So, it's a little frustrating when people don't understand that. The other thing is that we aren't a cheerleading show. We're not sort of rah. Let's do everything we can. No, we want obviously Ashes to succeed, but we ask questions and we talk about things that we like, we don't like, very much openly. So, and that's going to often go against what other people think. And that's okay. That's actually what generates conversation, and that's what's fun. The last few days, I would just say, I do this for fun personally. So, if you're going to kind of come at me with some sort of negative energy, I'm just not going to bother with it. It's a waste of time, and it's a waste of your energy. Honestly, if you spend hours a day upset about a game, then there's probably something greater that needs to be discussed, which I might be your person for if you ever want to PM me.
A game you can't even play and won't be able to for a little bit, and it'll only be the second alpha. So why get so mad? It's only a game.
But it is what it is, and we enjoy what we do. We've been doing this for 9 years. Nobody's going anywhere. There were several people that were sort of, why do you have Diggs on there? Because he's been here for 9 years. We're not going to ask him to go just because he disagrees with, what we want to do, and he has his own opinions. That's how it always is. I am curious how his words have cut so deep. It's been very interesting to see the reactions, but I don't want to dwell on that too much.
Well, I want to say that the funny thing to me is that I can not play a game and still support it. I haven't said anything negative about the change. I just said it's not a server rule set that I would play on. I didn't say I'm not happy that the change happened. It's fine that the change happened. People are probably going to enjoy the change. I think most people seem to enjoy it. I think that's great. Right.
Yeah, and my personal opinion is you will eventually get around to playing. But anyways, we have other things to discuss.
I do want to say real quick, there is definitely a point to the idea of MMOs that other players are content, MMOs and meows, and online games in general, where there's some sort of competitive and or cooperative factor. So I can understand a little bit also kind of looking at the whole scheme of everything, that part of this is also kind of ensuring that there's a space where players are always going to be content in certain ways. So there's the open seas, and then there's the, more scheduled, big battles and stuff. Places that they're designated. There's going to be PvP there. If you're going there, it's not necessarily that you're. Well, I guess if it's one of the big like world battle things, like defending a node or something, like it's going to be some amount of expecting to go there to PvP, not necessarily the open waters. There's going to be a lot of content out there, but I guess part of it is again that part of that content means they want to have the option for players to be able to attack other players, even if they're not going to, and be able to do so without trying to mitigate and balance. Well, only the cannoneers fired at that ship. They're the ones that get corruption, not the rest of us. We're innocent. We told them not to. That there's no amount of that everybody, in order to make sure everyone's responsible for their actions on the open seas, they make that there's no room for minutia and angle shooting where part of the crew gets in trouble, but the ship itself doesn't. So, for a technical reason, especially if we're talking about multiple ships of 20 plus people, that's a whole lot of flags to try to manage otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think because people have been asking what about caravan flagging, and I think theoretically, if being on a ship flagged you for PvP, that would be different to me than the whole zone, because I don't have to be on a ship. But I think you're right. I think the reason it happened is not just because higher risk is higher rewards mean higher risk. I think the real reason is more likely that it's technical. It's just easier to not have to try and deal with all the minutia of everybody flagging. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think
that's another reason why I'm not really particularly upset about it. It's just doesn't happen to be a rule set that I go for.
Right.
Well, and I think there's some confusion. I saw that comparison too. Caravans are sort of optional, PvP content. There isn't any PvE content to caravans, and naval content is different in that there's planned to be an extensive amount of PvE content. Again, I'm fine with it. I'll just go out either with a group or on a little tiny raft. But I do think there is a core difference, and somewhere and it might just be this DA person again who likes to mention my name on Discord but never actually tags me. If you tag me, I will have a conversation. Like, that's fine. Like a civil conversation too. It's cool. I don't think anyone was saying that naval content from this show was introduced by Kickstarter. Like, it was already planned. But what Kickstarter did, and I actually have pulled up the specific, because this was a comment on the YouTube video as well, about what did Kickstarter actually do with naval content. And Steven actually posted an update number 9 on May 8th, 2017. And it mentions, everyone here is so excited about the additional ships and water content that we will be creating. Sea-based trade routes, combat ships, treasure hunting, underwater dungeons, and mounts. A whole new sea of content. So that does seem to indicate that's actually where that came from. But again, I think that's the main thing here is just, that it's not that it's forcing us to go PvP, a PvE player to go PvP if they don't want to. They just would stay away. I think it's the access to the other content that's there. So we'll just have to see how it works. But that's why we have Alpha 2. And, I'm hopeful that things are fine. It's okay for me. But the title of the show.
Yeah, the title of the show. Once upon a Skullbeard. Skullbeards, everybody. So there's definitely, like, the first thing I thought of when I saw that was immediately thinking about, from a non-magical biological perspective, how or why this would possibly happen. And I think the best one that I've come up with isn't hair follicles growing in and from the bone itself, but instead more approaching it from the angle of, say, a manatee, where with oh no, not a manatee, a narwhal, where it's got the tooth that grows upwards and out through its skull. It's not a ramming horn. That's a sensory sort of device. Now, it wouldn't really be comfortable to bang that around in combat. So what would the difference be for the dwarves? Well, it would still be a sort of modified tooth that, like, I would imagine there's an additional row of teeth, like under or behind or something, that grows through in these more, hair-like formations. And they have not pain receptors on them, because that would hurt like hell, but they've got like certain gas and flavor sort of receptors, so that they can identify, basically be their own canaries, that, if you're around certain sorts of gases that you wouldn't normally be able to like smell or taste or perceive, their beards have sensory elements to it. It could also be a pressure sort of thing, that it helps detect, like, how far down into the earth that you've gone, that it, some property of it changes, something like that. But then the other thing I think of is, okay, so it doesn't have pain receptors. That's fine to trim it. But would it taste weird when you've got like your metal and clay beads and stuff all over it? Like, you'd be tasting those too, if you're able to taste like the gases and stuff, I would imagine. Now that's talking about it from a purely non-magical, biological, like, how could something like this exist and not just absolutely be, body horror?
Well, beyond that, we saw it on a skull, it's from a dead dwarf. So why is it still attached to the skull? Like, and the skin, everything else has fallen off. So how is the hair still attached? I want to know that as well.
It's because dwarves have to have beards. And it's due to the skull. It's due to the bones. Not the skin, or what's beneath the skin.
I don't know. I don't know how far we can actually take this conversation, but
It's because magic.
I'm curious how that even came up. Like, I want to know who within the team was like, hey, I have an idea. Let's have the hair grow from the skull. Like, let's place those follicles in the skull tissue.
Or that's just a very specific aesthetic that the Minotaur folk do, is whenever they kill someone, they'll skin them, flay their skin off, but do it in such a way that they can then glue all of the hair back on in the places. So if there was like a full skeleton, you would see like all the chest and back hair like all over the rib cage, just kind of pasted on or whatever very finely. And I can't really comprehend anything short of that, other than just from an art perspective. Well, it looks cool.
If Pyre can have branchlers growing from their skulls, dwarves can have beards growing from their skulls. That's the way that works.
All right. I want to know what other oddities exist from a biological perspective. When we know more about the Tolnar, like,
I was going to say, yeah, we've got the Tolnar, so
I'm incredibly curious.
Okay, now I've got these other weird questions, like, is there anything like, to like through them? Can they go like and blow up their cheeks real big, and then like their beards blow out and get all big or something? Like, that'd be hilarious. I got the Dunir pufferfish response.
Oh.
Or Nukua. I mean, that they seem a little more primal by comparison, so I could see them, also harnessing that sort of thing.
That's a big question. Is that true or Skullbeards true for Nikua as well as for Dunir? I think it's just Dunir, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we have no way to know yet. Like that's still just in concept art.
Just from a pure we all have beards, so we don't really have to go through this. But when you shave, if the hair grows up, you can get ingrown hair just from the skin. So imagine it coming out of the skull. Like, gosh, what kind of boils and things could come if it's just.
Well, if that's how your beard grows.
You can't remove a dwarven beard. It's just there.
Yeah, I think it would be that the skin itself would have to grow differently, so it wouldn't, have those issues that you do just.
I mean, that's a good point too. The follicle opens up to air, so obviously you'd have to have a very strange follicle that opens up in the skull all the way through the skin to the surface. So, talk about some really terrible acne.
Unless there's just some like thick grease of some sort that they secrete that just keeps the whole area sealed and lubricated. And like constantly they're secreting at such a rate that dirt can't even accumulate because it just kind of like oils out. And that's why they've got to keep combing their beards constantly, because it's just like it's full of dwarf goo. And then of course, when they're working on things in the shop and like something's, not spinning like it needs to, they can just do a little this and rub it on and bam, it's lubricated. Good to go. It's not gross, Sheridan. It's hilarious.
I don't remember if we mentioned how cool the Nakua concept art that we saw at the last dev stream was awesome. We had 5 images of a Nakua male, and they were great. We didn't see any females. So the Dunir females we saw in Alpha 1 had the option to grow beards. And we'll have to see if the same is true for Nakua. How different are the Nakua from Dunir in that regard?
So, anything else on Skullbeards? This is so weird.
It's a really weird sort of thing. We have no idea. They do a very good job doing things based on the concept art. Concept art gets approved. So it's not like this was just some oversight that happened to slip through. So there's going to have to be something, either it's part of the lore, it's part of the Minotaur aesthetic, that this is what they like to do. So they kill the dwarves because their beards stay on their skulls, or if it's, that they keep certain parts of head hair and put them back on their victims before mounting their skulls. Would they do that if it was just a mustache? Some guy's got nice pompadour, big, thick, bushy mustache. You killed him. You got all the rest of the flesh off. Not a dwarf, but are you going to put that mustache and pompadour back on before you mount him on the shield? That's the real question here. How do Minotaurs decide what hair they put on what parts of relics from their conquered foes? Also, one more question. Whose skulls are those? Those aren't player skulls, because players crumble into a pile of ash. Those had to be mundane dwarves of whatever type, I guess Dunir.
Maybe Minotaurs have a way of preventing that so that they can grab the skulls.
I know, and nothing in Alpha 1 sticks, but there was a way it was kind of explained in Alpha 1, which was, oh, hey, we sent 2 recruits to this mushroom cave. Could you go check on them? It's like, oh, God, one of them was killed by spiders, and the other one was almost killed by spiders. Well, I'm thinking to myself, killed by spiders? Did she respawn? Like, this is a respawn point right here. Like, what's the problem?
Because what you're saying is we were sent to a pile of bones, right?
We were sent to the corpse of that lady surrounded in dead spiders, and then her spider poisoned friend down below hiding in the mushrooms.
Right. Yep. And both of those were bones, right?
No. He was alive, and hers was a body that was kind of hard to find because there were no like highlights or anything. Mm-hmm. that was so the bodies were intact, or her body was intact. It didn't melt away into ash, which would of course imply a respawn.
Yeah, but she was dead.
Yeah, she was dead,
and the other one was still alive.
Because players are magical and everyone else is like, you're dead. You're expendable.
All right. I do want to mention something that got brought up related to digs. I've done some digging. There's been some speculation of making digs an enemy of the state, which I had to dig into what that actually would entail. In the wiki, of course, like always, the wiki is a great place to go. So for any source of information, it has all kinds of.
But I would say always look at the source. Don't just look at the quote.
Well, so that's what I've done.
Yeah.
So I was curious about this because what was sort of implied was, well, we don't like digs, so everyone that's a mayor will just make you an enemy of the state, and therefore you will be kill on sight to anyone, NPC or PC, I guess, because they would get some sort of quest or bounty component out of that. So I did look as to where that came from. It appears the bulk of it comes from an article or a blog post that was written back in November of 2018. I'm sure you looked at this too, Diggs. But what it basically says is foreign citizens of certain cities can be named enemies of the state. So it looks like in principle you could not name an individual as an enemy of the state. You're actually naming citizens from a node, so it would be the entire group of people from that node as sort of an alternative or a preempt to starting a war, actually declaring war. This is just sort of an alternative method. So I don't think on its face.
I think it's individuals. You can declare individuals from a rival, that is a foreign citizen. I don't think you flagged the whole node.
Well, the text was also in the context of declaring node wars. And Stephen, maybe, this was 4 years ago, so I'm sure things have changed. Yeah. But it did have, in the way they use citizens plural instead of singular, it sounded like this was a way to say, I don't like this node. If you're a citizen of that node, you're not welcome in my town.
Yeah, I think each enemy of the state that you declare accrues more cost associated with the next one. So I don't think you can do a whole node, but you could do several different ones. So it's foreign citizens, but I think, and it's multiples, but I don't think multiples are possible.
I mean, the easiest way around that, I guess, the easiest way around that is just don't be a citizen of anywhere. Now,
that's what I was. Yeah,
now, you don't get to have a freehold, but you just, I guess, use somebody else's, some of your friends.
Yeah.
The other, I guess, part to that is just become a citizen of a metropolis, and then because I would assume if you're on the tier 6, the shit flows downwards, right? So they can't go up at you. A mayor can't declare, a vassal can't declare war on its superior. So I would assume the same as this equal for citizens. But
there's another quote. Yeah, there's another quote though that says that it talks about accruing it based on reputation. So you get positive and negative reputation depending on your actions. Node reputation, and I think. They were saying that that actually negates. So this one was from 2021, I think, that quote. And they were saying that, well, if you have a bad reputation like I do, that means the mayor can just decide to declare me a enemy of the state. But I think I would still have to be doing stuff against that node in order to accrue the bad reputation systematically. So I'm attacking their caravans, participating in node sieges against the node. I think that would accrue enough bad reputation that they would be able to declare me an enemy of the state. But I don't think they can do it if I haven't been doing anything against the node. That's the way I was reading it. But
I wonder, though, what sort of things they'd be able to implement to try to sanction a player that is problematic, but don't have enough reputation hits from that person to, knock them down or put them on the list or whatever. Like, if you're going to a specific node and you're mining out a mineral from an area that's been tapped out a few times, and the local leadership is saying, leave that area alone, you keep going there and you keep doing that, is that the sort of thing that they'd be able to hold against you and start knocking your reputation down for? Will there be a mechanic for that? Or is it more one of those, like, if they want to enforce making sure people aren't mining there, you just got to kill the people there at the time, and that's the way you got to deal with it, sort of thing. And then the other question is, well, if you're doing that and the person doesn't fight back, but you're attacking them on behalf of the city based on mayoral orders to not mine in that area and attack people who try to, well, I mean, will there even be tools for that? I can keep on asking questions, but I think this is one of those things where they'll have to reveal more information about how the whole reputation system works, what you can do to run afoul of the rules and actually have that be accrued on digital paper, as it were, have it receipted in some way, or how much of it is not actually going to work that way, and little things aren't going to affect your reputation. It's only very specific things like PvP, caravans, and contributions, tax contributions or whatever. No idea.
That being said, I'm also curious to see, and I want to ask this at some point, probably next year, as a dev live stream question, because I don't think we have any information on this, if any, because there's the article on the wiki page for reputation is almost completely focused on what happens with negative node reputation. I don't think I saw anything other than it exists, any examples of what positive node reputation would grant you. So I'm curious what Stephen will say some examples of that are.
That's a good question. I would imagine it would be being allowed to get certain rights and benefits and other sorts of things. Perhaps part of being able to get a freehold isn't just the material resources, but
that's on a different node. So you're earning, someone who's not a citizen can earn positive reputation towards the node.
Oh, right. I see what you say. Well, there's probably local quests from NPCs. I kind of get the feeling, not that they're going to do a quest board like they did in New World, for example, but there'll be some place where regular quests that need to be done to help keep things going will be regularly available, and players will be able to engage in them. So even if you're not a citizen, even if you're not a resident, and then what that does for your reputation, maybe NPCs will be giving you a discount or something that they wouldn't normally give you. Or
I think that's one, because the flip side is true. Yeah.
It could also reduce the cost of citizenship if you do decide to move in. It might give you more chances to run caravans, work on caravans coming from there. Even though you're not a resident, you've built up your reputation there. And so they might see, well, you're decent with caravans in general, and you're decent with this area in general. So, good enough. We'll have you join. So, I'd imagine there's going to be some amount of that sort of thing. Other sorts of things, who knows, could be that wayward NPCs you come across will have different dialogues that come across an NPC hunter in the woods, and you're not liked in the area. They'll just say, hey, stop scaring the prey away. If you come back after you're, a little more reputed in the area, it's like, oh, golly, I need some help with something here.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a curiosity question when it comes to the map. So we obviously know that the map was expanded, and this kind of also ties into the naval content. So I've take a lot of notes, and I've been doing a lot of videos and just watching things. And Stephen specifically mentions that the reason they increased the map to 1,200 square kilometers is because they felt like it was too dense. The content was, there was just too much going on, and that you needed a little bit more open area and just not have the density of content around you, which makes sense. Certainly, I can understand not wanting things to be so dense and how that would lead to an increased size. But later on, as he's breaking down that size, he actually mentions that on land there's 450 to 480 square kilometers, and he specifically says so there's not too much that has been added to the land side, as there has been greater separation between the continents and a reorientation of the continents. And so it would appear or sound as though the water side is what's been expanded the most to the 750 square kilometers. So again, that kind of goes back to this idea of naval content. So if they were if there was a concern of density, that almost makes it sound like the density concern was in the water, not necessarily on the land. But then they also mention nodes were reduced too. So I don't think we'll probably get any more information on that. And I'm not going to throw a fit about gaining more land. I mean, anything else we can explore is great. But I was just curious on the sort of differences of statements there.
I do like the idea that a little bit more land, but mostly that they've knocked down the number of nodes a little bit, so there's a bit more of a focus on tailored content and more specific activities and events in each one, as well as I would imagine the borders are going to be a little bit bigger for all of them compared to what they had been before or what they had projected to be before. So that's probably another thing that's going to help with the density, is that each individual node, town, city, whatever, is potentially going to have a larger area than it was going to. So even though there might be less of them, I think it's going to help make more housing and more space for them, so they're a little bit more not only interesting and spread out, and once again, not dense, not clustered, but also it changes the strategy and logistics when a place is going to be attacked, because now there's a lot more area you have to cover.
I like to bring up the Bartle score. I think it's fun to associate it with my playstyle, even though the questions that end up that they use to form the Bartle score outdated. They're from the 90s, so there's all kinds of Morg related stuff, that MMORPG related stuff that isn't in there. But my Bartle score is something like 87% explorer, 73% socializer, 47% achiever, and 0% killer. And that 87% explorer is pretty on it hits home fairly well. It's on target. In games like WoW or EQ, I will often spend hours swimming around the coasts in order to uncover as much of the map as possible. It does frustrate me to not be able to swim across the ocean or across a sea and hit deep waters. Even though I can see there's something on the other side, I can't swim or travel directly across to it. So that frustrates me in those games, and it would frustrate me with the open seas to see it but have to stick to the coasts. But I think it's really cool that we're going to be able to do that, even if it's through ships. I'd prefer to use my aquatic mount probably to explore beneath there, but I'd want to explore beneath the oceans rather than just across the top. But I think it's cool that we have that much open sea to explore, that it's at least available map-wise. I think that's great.
You would swim across that big old ocean?
Yeah,
I feel like that would take forever.
it would.
Well, you press W or you press auto run or whatever, and then you like start watching a movie and make sure you're going the right direction every now and then. You know, it's just a thing. You know.
Yeah.
Now I'm still wondering. It still hasn't been clarified yet that I'm aware of, and I'm not sure. This might be a good one to ask for the monthly. Is it only ships that flag, or if you swim across, or if you ride your little turtle mount across, do you also automatically flag?
Right.
That's what it sounds like. I mean, it sounds like if you're in, you're gonna.
It sounds like it's the zone.
Yeah, they describe the process, right? The UI. You get closer to it, you're gonna get a warning. I don't think they said, you know, if you're in a boat and you get close, if you get closer to it, you'll get a warning that you're going to flag. Now, I feel like that would be, well, I don't know. We'll see what they say after the discussion that's occurred in the last 2 weeks.
Kind of going back to the subject of the difficulty and the technicality of trying to have differential flagging aboard two ships where people are, you know, trying to attack or whatever. I could see that not as a loophole, but as a way to allow people to play and access some of that content, but not be harried in the same way that they would if they were going out with the ship. That a small group of people might be able to go out, and because they're individually responsible for one another or themselves, or whatever small sized group that they're in, remain in normal flagging protocols instead of boat crossing into open waters flagging protocols. But again, we don't know. They got to answer this one. It's just going to be speculation till then.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I wanted to mention from the stream, there's so much that they went over, was the discussing, there was a question about player housing. And since the map size has changed, did that change, the node count has changed, did that change available housing? And there's actually, I was just watching Discord a little bit today because there was an ongoing discussion about apartments, like what actually will be available. Is it 50? Is it more? But then there's also freeholds and other things as well that seems a little bit hard to pin down. Now, the answer to that was that no, that the target numbers when it comes to static housing, apartment housing in areas and freehold space, those are set numbers. You know, and Stephen did mention to us, well, to everyone, that if you wanted a freehold, because this was the other stream of it, how hard it's going to be to get a freehold. You know, if you want a freehold, you'll get a freehold. So he sort of made that promise that if you put in the time. Now, the thing that he ended this conversation with, and I don't think that's talking about freeholds, but what I was curious about was, he said, and this is a quote, but, you know, we want to have an equitable amount that's necessary to create scarcity, to create a meaning for why I would purchase a home within the world or within a city, and why that price is there. So we all know they've talked about real estate, but that started to creep my, you know, I got a little bit like, okay, what is this, apartments? Is this freehold? Like, what exactly are we referring to here when we're talking about scarcity? I don't think it's freeholds, but
I think the scarcity is meant to be, and I feel like I might have brought this one up on the last episode, kind of like a pyramid of availability where freeholds are at the top of that. Mm-hmm. There's the fewest of them, requires, you know, the highest amount of resources and preparation. And then the in-world housing, they're not freeholds. They're the pre-built houses, the nice little pre-built houses around town. Then below that, I would imagine, is the apartments. And then below that is like the instance taverns where I don't know if you can even decorate them, or it's just a lodging for you basically. That's I would have to go back and see if there are any other layers in there, or there might be some other details, but I'm guessing it's going to be something like that. Everybody can sit at the bottom. If you want a little bit more luxury and you want maybe a little bit more room to work, maybe a little bit more space to store stuff that's in your own personal storage, you get the place that you pay a little bit of rent on. You get some extra benefits. You can put your furniture down. If you're looking for, more long term, you're going to set up a business. You're going to set up some limited amount of facilities that you want people to be able to access. Then I would imagine you're looking at the in-home or freehold at that point. You're probably looking at an in-home if you're doing it more small deal, personal sort of thing, or if you're, big guilty, big entrepreneur sort of person, there's a decent chance you're looking at freehold. Also, if you play the hell out of the game and everybody knows that guy's awesome, they give us the best deals, they make all the cool stuff, we're just going to make sure that person always has a freehold. Doesn't matter if the ant's nest kicks over that, whatever kingdom they're living in, we'll be there behind in the next place they set up, because damn it, they make the best stuff. Right. That can also happen.
And I think this is just an unfortunate combination of wording that is just, you have to read between the lines, because I can't imagine, especially with freehold, since we can only have one per account, that there's any concept of real estate within freeholds. I mean, I guess there could be, maybe. I don't know. Have they told us if we can sell freeholds the same as we could sell housing, static housing within a node? I don't know that they've even, because I doubt they've even said that, because I doubt that's even a possibility. But it was just one of those things.
You wouldn't be selling a freehold; you'd be selling the plot of land,
right?
Maybe.
Yeah, I guess that's more what I'm referring to. And again, the more I think this through, the more that doesn't make sense either, because you have to overcome. You can't just buy it. You have to have overcome the difficulties of whatever they'll be that he mentioned. So I think this was just an unfortunate sort of combination of two different things. But
someone in the forums was actually a couple people want to have the ability to set down tents. They want to set down a tent with some storage there. So you're just out and you just set your tent there, and you can go off and do stuff and have your storage. And I'm like, I don't think they could do that, because that would probably interfere with where you can place freeholds. I mean, now that they've expanded the map, maybe there's some, if you're not within node territory and it's the open wilds or something, then you can do that. But I don't see how.
But I feel like
you'd just be able to put a tent down anywhere. And someone even said maybe you could make a shanty town, and I'm like, that's exactly why you wouldn't be able to do that.
I think if you do that, you don't let it be protected like a freehold, right? If you're going to place a tent, like, no, you can set who comes into your freehold outside of a successful siege. So I feel like if you're going to do that, if you're going to allow a shanty town, then you also allow the possibility someone just comes in and burns it all down.
Yeah.
I like the idea of spells and temporary consumables and things like that. If you're going to be setting down in an area, you've got something that you're hunting there, you're, whatever it is, you and your friends are going to be there for a bit. I like the idea of being able to put down something that, so long as everybody stays within a certain radius and are accessing it at a certain frequency, it stays up. It's maybe a tent with a few posts. It's got a fire. Maybe it's a magic dome that you can walk in and out of that just stays nice and comfortable. It's kind of like your little refuge that you're going to go back to, do triage, sort stuff out, meet back if you get routed or whatever. Just a little thing. Maybe enemies can knock it over. Not a big deal. You make another one, or, maybe that's a sign to get the hell out of the area. Not necessarily as a place to store things, perhaps though as a place to create a temporary to and from point if you've got some sort of messenger creature. I think of Torchlight in this case, but it could be done in a variety of ways. Got your pack mule that knows the way to town, knows the way back, and you got a merchant you're friends with there that knows that when this mule comes in with bags of stuff, that's loot to sell. So, or store or whatever it is. That's the sort of stuff I think that'd be nice to have, but just temporary, not long term. It's just something that would only be there for a short time. Again, as a rallying point, as like a little operating base for just a moment. It's not something that you'd expect to be there an hour later, a day later.
I think people would loot it and should be able to loot it, get rid of it, especially if they want to put a freehold there. So I think it's not worth it. Probably not worth it to people, but if you want to do a risk versus reward type thing and risk leaving your stuff out in the open for people to loot, okay.
I don't think he'd use it for storage. I would have to imagine.
That's what people were saying with their tents. Like, it's a place you can set down a tent and put some stuff.
I'll loot your tent. Yeah, I'll loot your tent because it's out in the open. Of course, we're going to want to loot your tent.
Well, and if you don't have enough room on your person anyways, that tent's not going to help you if you're in the middle of nowhere. I feel like you could make that argument if there was sort of some sort of rest benefit. Like if you could get, I don't know how you would do that in an MMORPG. You can't just like pass time in an instant. But if there was something that you could do, or cooking, I guess, if you could create a little tent campsite.
I could too for just simple stuff. Things that instead of going all the way back to town to do a full repair, you can do like a partial repair with some amount of materials, and then to get it the rest of the way you would need the proper materials or something like that. Things like that, just enough to kind of keep things going. Maybe you mix down and distill a couple of potions into a stronger potion because you need something a little stronger, whatever it would be. But yeah, just I like the idea, and not just in freehold locations, but really anywhere, to be able to set up, once again, a very temporary and bypassable sort of thing. It probably need to have some considerable distance restrictions to make sure people can't cram up a pass with it, that you'll always be able to get by. Otherwise, people are just going to put them in caves, and then it's going to be a big old mess. Or people are going to use the ones that's like a ramped lean-to and put those in caves and use them to platform and bypass things, and equally a problem.
All kinds of stuff outside of dungeons. It's going to be a problem trying to get in and all that stuff. Which is,
at the same time, I feel like it's proper that if you and your friends are part of a crew that's blocking a road, a pathway, that you would have some amount of a camp set up there. Because if your job, the mayor, the local leadership, whatever, has sent you guys out there, and anybody who comes through, you hustle them for info, and if they don't know the password or they don't have the right thing, they've got to hand over some money, and then you hand over some of that to us. And, we've got like a fake tolling system, a little protection fund sort of thing going on. Yeah, you would want to, I would imagine you would see some tents and some little outposty sort of things for something like that.
Think of like a Mount Everest or K2. You have these big, large dungeons, and you have little tent towns that pop up in between. So you can take a rest in between the legs. There's your way to start in some PvP. That would be fun. All this week too, while we're, I guess, talking about housing related stuff. So I did actually find a quote from Steven. I did not write it down. At least in my head, there had been a question. Okay, if you lose your freehold to a siege, how hard will it be to replace it? Since we know that the initial placement will be so difficult. And he did say somewhere that, you will not have to reestablish all those things. Like once you've gone through whatever this process is, in order to be able to set a freehold, you won't have to do that again. You'll just have to basically find a new place and become a citizen and kind of go from there.
We were talking in chat about one of the things is group octopus mounts, 1 tentacle per person, which is kind of interesting, I think.
Who controls it?
It controls you. I don't know.
Well, remind me again, what's the projected party size? Is it 8?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then that works.
Yep. Perfect.
That could be interesting. Again, if you want to do some PvP combat on a 2 different octopus mounts fighting each other.
Give us a Kraken mount, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That'd be fun. I mean, I would actually, if you could do a legit mount versus ship, and I could go underwater with some sort of spell, hold my breath to where they can't see us coming, and just come out of the water with a Kraken mount, I would probably do that. I would probably end up dying, but that's fine. That would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
That was something else I was wondering. Boss tokens at sea. I'd love to see somewhere that some sort of sea battle is going on, and then being able to get close enough and pop a boss token, and suddenly it's turned from a 1v1 to a 1v1v1.
Yeah, I think monster coins, those are event based. You can only use them during events. So,
Yeah.
What's to say that 2 ships fighting in the open water won't flag as an event?
it's pretty unlikely.
Well, and I think the process is it tells you, right? Hey, something's happening. If you want to use a coin, use a coin. Isn't that how
Right.
that's
I mean, it has been kind of projected as something for more like scheduled events. A raid is going to happen here or whatever sort of stuff. So I see what you mean. Yeah. I still think it'd be a great thing. Open seas, burn your boss coins.
There was an interesting question about gold sellers. I'm curious your opinions on this. Sort of, how are they going to combat gold selling? And Steven's answer was interesting. Talking about how really it's, if you, I guess I didn't realize this because I'm not necessarily a competitive, and when he used the word competitive, I'm assuming PvP player. I guess
PvP world first,
I guess world
raider,
first too, But that if it is something that is not handled by the studio, that it ends up everyone who's competitive just buys gold because they have to buy gold in order to stay competitive with everyone else that's buying gold, which is interesting. I guess I never had thought of that. But obviously he said, well, interestingly, he said that he admitted he was one of those people that would buy gold. He didn't say in what game. I have an idea of where that probably was, but
yeah, because you have to keep up, and he's competitive, and he had to keep up. I normally don't pay attention to stuff like that because I don't pay attention to player economy, because I think player economy sucks because gamers going to game, gamers going to exploit, and usually with the player economy, they drive prices up way too high. When I'm looking at an auction house for stuff, I'm usually thinking, why the fuck would I pay that kind of money to somebody? I'll just go get it myself or make it myself. I'm not paying that money. So I usually ignore it and just deal with NPCs. But in Alpha 1, it was crazy to log into the game and suddenly find out I have 1 million gold, or I don't know what it was, 100,000 gold or something like that, because somebody just gave it to everybody in the area. It's like, what happened, and what do I do with this other than report it? It's like I don't even know what's going on. So yeah, I'm assuming that they'll have ways to deal with exploits and stuff like that.
Well, here's my question, and why I find this interesting is, he basically said, we're not going to allow that at all, which I understand. We're going to have GMs, and if you get caught, we're going to make sure the punishment is significant, that it's not like a slap on the wrist 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then you get banned. Like, it's going to be, if you get caught, you're going to be out. and which I think is fine. My curiosity, though, is that ahead of time this is going to become an issue, and it's going to constantly be an issue. And you have to always evolve to how other people are doing things because they're going to find ways to do this. And the games where I think, okay, where has it not been a big issue, are ones that have just been found a way to sell gold to the players themselves. And you think of World of Warcraft. Buying tokens, you can real money purchase gold, and it doesn't seem to have disrupted things too much. It seems to have been done in a really thoughtful way. Now, this is a game at the end of its life, so its economy is, it is what it is. And I could see where that might be a concern here, where we're trying to get into these ideas of regional markets, regional auction houses, nothing global. If you do introduce some sort of developer supported, gold buy, that can disrupt that. But, I would say that in games where that's been done, that's pretty much eliminated gold sellers, right? So.
Yeah, by legitimize. And I know there's the thing that Eve did. They were one of the ones to adopt that pretty early on, the idea of being able to trade in-game money for monthly subscription code things. And then, of course, WoW did it. And I remember, I want to say it was even back in the days of EQ Next Landmark, that Tanlin was saying he could play for a week and cover like a month subscription for 2 accounts. So I guess that was another kind of funny thing, the idea that once you've gotten to a certain established point in these games, it's not like you even need to buy the money. It's nice that they've got the system, because then he can just go and grind and do a week's worth of gameplay and get the money or get the subscription covered that way, because people want to get their gold. And it's easy for him to get that amount. If someone's looking for hundreds of millions or billions of gold, I don't know what the limits are in the game or whatever, but instead of doing a week's worth of collecting, just buy it from other people if you really need it that bad. But it's nice that they have that system that you can, actually do that. I've seen other games that do that. What was it called? Spiral Knights. It was a Sega, and I think there might have been another company involved. Fun little 4-player online game. They also had a system like that, that you can use your money to buy because it was a free game, it was the resource that you needed to do higher tier crafting and upgrades. So yeah, it's a thing. I think it's probably going to be a good way for them to start to combat it, if they want to. But it could very well be the sort of thing where they're going to be trying to test some real new innovative solutions and methods, to see if they can just be ahead of the system, be able to, eliminate the grifting and all of that sort of stuff without having to go to the subscription for gold system.
How does that relate to pay to win, if at all?
If some amount of having way more gold than other people is something that amounts to winning, then technically that would be pay to win. But I think having a pile of gold is just a means to enable access to things. It's not that you necessarily have the things. It's not going to automatically level you up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree, Grumpy Guy, that I don't think that's something I'm necessarily advocating for right now, right? I'm not saying, hey, let's from the beginning allow for gold selling. I'm just thinking long term that there's been certainly, I think, instances where it's been implemented well. So, so we're almost out of time. Actually, I want to mention one other thing from that actual question. There was a quote that Stephen had said. It said, Ashes quote, Ashes has active customer service. It has an active community team. And if there's one thing that you guys have seen over this development so far is even prior to the game launching, prior to significant test sessions, we focus on community engagement. Margaret and her team are doing a phenomenal job. And I know I say this often, I love them all in engaging with the community. And I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with that idea of their community team has been wonderful. And I'm glad he kind of said that out loud. You know, we've been doing this since the beginning, what now, 5 years for this specific to this show, I think 2017. And gosh, when did we first, you know, we've had Steven on twice, like, was it 2018, 2021? Like, you know, the fact that they even would take the time to know streamers and engage on a community level has been great. So, yeah, that's a good point too. I didn't think about buying a node. The person that owns the most gold, right? That's how the economic?
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
I think that's what we've been told, right? So if you
that might be, but that might also change.
Yep.
All right. Well, is there anything left to say for this show?
I
don't think so. Remind me again when the ask me anything.
Sometime in October.
Thing was sometime in October.
Both Reddit and they'll also do some questions on their forums. And
was that at all related to revealing the Ranger?
He wanted to wait until after, so that could be
specifically to review. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and we'll have a show in between. Gosh, what are we now? 2 weeks. So we'll have a show in 2 weeks, probably.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have what?
I'm just thinking of the next live stream. And the
next live stream is going to be.
Sorry, I got distracted because I just glanced over and saw from Artorias just "we need tentacles" in all caps, and that caught my attention. So.
Mm-hmm. Tentacles mount for groups.
Yeah, yep. All I saw is "we need tentacles."
Mm-hmm.
All right.
There's a different channel for that sort of thing. Well, I suppose if that's it, then everybody be sure to shave your jawbones. Or I'm still not sure how that works.
You don't shave. You don't shave.
All right. Well, everyone have a great week, and we will see you back here on Sunday.
All right. Later, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Ciao.